The winter of 1878 was the cruelest Montana had seen in decades, turning the rugged landscape into a merciless white prison as Madeline Granger huddled against the base of a pine tree, her fingers blue and her hope fading with each labored breath that hung in the frigid air before her. She had been traveling for 3 days since the stagecoach accident, wandering through the endless white expanse of the Northern Territory with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small bundle of possessions clutched to her chest. The trail to Florissant had disappeared beneath the heavy snowfall hours ago, and with the temperature dropping rapidly as night approached, Madeline knew she wouldn't survive until morning. Her eyelids grew heavy as the cold seeped deeper into her bones. She had heard that freezing to death was like falling asleep, and the thought almost comforted her as she leaned her head against the rough bark of the tree. Just as her eyes began to close, the sound of approaching hoofbeats cut through the howling wind. She tried to call out, but her voice emerged as nothing more than a weak whimper. Through the swirling snow, a figure on horseback materialized like a specter. The rider dismounted with fluid grace that betrayed years of experience in the saddle. As he approached, Madeline could make out a tall frame wrapped in a heavy sheepskin coat, a weathered face partially obscured by a snow-dusted bandana, and eyes that assessed her condition with a single practiced glance. "Miss." His voice was deep and clear, cutting through the wind as he knelt beside her. "Can you hear me?" Madeline managed a faint nod, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. The stranger quickly removed his gloves and pressed warm fingers to her wrist, checking her pulse. "You're half frozen." Without hesitation, he unwrapped his own heavy woolen scarf and secured it around her neck and lower face. "No one freezes while I'm breathing," he declared with quiet determination, already working to lift her to her feet. "See, can't feel my legs," she stammered through blue lips. "Name's Quincy Foster," he said, supporting her weight against him. "Most folks call me Quinn. I've got a cabin not far from here." He whistled sharply, and his horse, a sturdy chestnut Mustang, trotted closer. With strength born of necessity, Quinn lifted Madeline onto the saddle before mounting behind her. He wrapped one arm securely around her waist while the other held the reins. "Lean back against me," he instructed, his breath warm against her ear. "We need to get you warmed up before frostbite sets in." Madeline's consciousness wavered as they rode through the gathering darkness. The steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the solid warmth of the man behind her the only constants in a world that had narrowed to pain and cold. She didn't remember arriving at the cabin, only brief flashes of being carried inside, of rough-hewn walls and the welcoming heat of a wood stove. Quinn worked quickly, stoking the fire to a roaring blaze before turning his attention back to his half-conscious charge. With brisk efficiency tempered by propriety, he removed her snow-soaked outer garments, replacing them with a clean flannel shirt and woolen trousers from his own meager wardrobe. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned and positioned her close to the fire. "Stay with me now," he murmured, rubbing her hands between his own as color slowly returned to her pale features. "That's it. Keep fighting." Madeline's eyes fluttered open, focusing on the face of her rescuer for the first time without the barrier of snow and growing darkness. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with a strong jawline covered in several days' worth of stubble. His eyes were the color of the Montana sky in summer, a clear, striking blue that conveyed both intensity and kindness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Quinn offered a small, reassuring smile. "Don't thank me yet. We've still got to get you properly warmed up." He rose and moved to the small stove in the corner of the single-room cabin. "I'll make some coffee, strong and hot." As feeling painfully returned to her extremities, Madeline took stock of her surroundings. The cabin was small but well constructed, clearly built by someone who understood the brutal Montana winters. A bed occupied one corner, a wooden table and 2 chairs another. Shelves lined with books and practical supplies covered one wall, while various tools and a rifle hung from pegs on another. It was a bachelor's dwelling, functional and sparse, yet there was an undeniable sense of home about it. "How did you find me?" she asked as Quinn pressed a steaming mug into her trembling hands. "I was tracking a wounded elk when I came across your tracks," he explained, settling into a chair near the fire. "Knew right away they were human and recent. In this weather, that meant trouble." He studied her face with quiet intensity. "What brings a woman alone to these parts in the dead of winter?" Madeline took a careful sip of the coffee, its warmth spreading through her chest. "I was on the stage to Florissant. My uncle lives there, William Granger. I'm to be his housekeeper." She closed her eyes briefly, remembering. There was an accident. The wheel broke on a stretch of ice. The driver. He didn't survive the fall. The other passengers decided to wait with the coach for help, but I knew we were still a day's journey from town. I thought I could make it on foot. Quinn's expression darkened. "That was 3 days ago. The Florissant stage was reported missing yesterday. Search party's been looking, but with this storm." He shook his head. "You're lucky to be alive." "The others," Madeline began, concern replacing the exhaustion in her eyes. "They'll be found," Quinn assured her, though his tone lacked conviction. "But you need rest now. We can't do anything until this storm passes anyway." He rose and added another log to the fire. "Try to get some sleep. I'll keep watch." Despite her concern for the other passengers, exhaustion quickly claimed Madeline, dragging her into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke hours later to the smell of bacon frying and the soft sound of movement. Daylight filtered through the cabin's single window, revealing that the storm had passed during the night. Quinn stood at the stove, his back to her as he tended to breakfast. He had removed his heavy coat, and Madeline could see the broad set of his shoulders beneath a faded blue shirt. His dark hair was longer than was fashionable, curling slightly at the nape of his neck. "Good morning," she said softly, sitting up. He turned, a look of relief crossing his features. "Wasn't sure when you'd wake. How are you feeling?" "Better." It wasn't entirely true. Her feet and hands throbbed with the pain of circulation returning, and every muscle ached, but she was alive, which seemed miracle enough. "Thank you for saving my life." Quinn shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. He placed a plate of bacon, beans, and bread before her. "Eat. You need your strength." They ate in companionable silence, Madeline stealing glances at her rescuer when he wasn't looking. There was something compelling about Quinn Foster, a quiet strength and self-sufficiency that spoke of a man accustomed to the solitary life, yet not embittered by it. "Once you're feeling stronger, I'll take you to Florissant," he said as he collected their empty plates. "It's about a day's ride in good weather." "Are you from Florissant?" Madeline asked. Quinn shook his head. "No, I keep to myself up here. Got a small herd of cattle in the valley below, but mostly I hunt and trap." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Florissant's a decent town, though." "Growing. Your uncle's the banker there, if I recall correctly." "Yes," Madeline confirmed. "He wrote to me after my parents died last spring. Typhoid." She twisted the simple gold band she wore on her right hand, her mother's wedding ring, the only memento she had. "I've been working as a seamstress in Chicago, but when Uncle William offered me a position and a home." She trailed off with a small shrug. "I'm sorry about your parents," Quinn said simply. Madeline nodded her thanks, touched by his sincerity. "What about you? Do you have family?" A shadow passed across Quinn's face. "Not anymore." He stood abruptly. I need to check on the horses and see about getting word to the search party about the stagecoach. He pulled on his coat and headed for the door. Rest up. I'll be back soon. Alone in the cabin, Madeline found herself drawn to the small collection of books on the shelf. It was an eclectic assortment, practical guides to farming and animal husbandry, alongside volumes of Whitman, Thoreau, and Shakespeare. Not the reading material one might expect from a solitary cattleman. She traced her finger along the spine of a well-worn copy of Walden, intrigued by this glimpse into the mind of the man who had saved her. When Quinn returned an hour later, his expression was grim. "I rode to the high ridge where I could signal the ranch in the next valley," he explained, hanging his coat by the door. "They found the stagecoach. The passengers were taken to Florissant yesterday, all alive, though one man has a broken leg." Relief washed over Madeline. "Thank goodness." "The problem," Quinn continued, "is that another storm is moving in from the north. We won't be able to make it to town before it hits." He met her gaze directly. "I'm afraid you're stuck with me for at least another 2 days." An unexpected flutter of something that wasn't quite disappointment stirred in Madeline's chest. "I'm sorry to impose," she said quickly. Quinn's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "It's no imposition, Miss Granger. It's not often I have company up here. Besides," he added, his expression sobering, "I gave my word you wouldn't freeze. Can't very well send you out in another blizzard." The next 2 days established a rhythm between them, a comfortable domesticity that surprised them both. Quinn showed Madeline how to use the rifles and pistols he kept for protection against both 2- and 4-legged threats. They cooked together, Quinn teaching her how to prepare venison and rabbit. In the evenings, they sat before the fire, talking long into the night. Quinn spoke little of his past, but Madeline gleaned that he had fought for the Union in the final year of the Civil War, despite being barely 18 at the time. He had come west afterward, working as a cowhand on various ranches before staking his own claim in this remote valley 5 years ago. Madeline, in turn, shared stories of her life in Chicago, of the boarding house where she had lived and worked, of her dreams of someday having her own dress shop. She found Quinn to be an attentive listener, genuinely interested in her experiences and thoughts in a way few men had ever been. On the morning of the 3rd day, Madeline woke to find Quinn already dressed for travel, packing provisions into saddlebags. "Storm's past," he said by way of greeting. "Skies clear all the way to Florissant. If we leave within the hour, we can make it by nightfall." Madeline nodded, ignoring the pang of regret that their time together was coming to an end. "I'll be ready." Quinn had a second horse, a gentle gray mare he used as a pack horse, saddled and ready for her. After a brief lesson on the basics of riding, they set out, following a trail that only Quinn seemed able to discern beneath the fresh snow. The day was crisp and clear, the landscape transformed into a dazzling white expanse that stretched to the distant mountains. Quinn rode slightly ahead, occasionally pointing out landmarks or wildlife. A herd of elk in the distance, the tracks of a mountain lion, an eagle soaring overhead. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, the first buildings of Florissant came into view. The town was larger than Madeline had expected, a proper street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above the rest. Lamplight glowed from windows, and smoke curled from chimneys, promising warmth and civilization after days in the wilderness. Quinn fell silent as they approached, his posture stiffening almost imperceptibly. Madeline sensed his discomfort but didn't comment, instead concentrating on controlling her horse as they entered the main street. Several people stopped to stare as they passed. A man sweeping the boardwalk outside the general store called out, "Well, I'll be damned." Quinn Foster in the flesh. Quinn raised a hand in acknowledgement but kept riding. They continued to the largest building on the street, a two-story structure with a sign proclaiming it the first bank of Florissant. Beside it stood an imposing Victorian house, clearly belonging to someone of means. "That'll be your uncle's place," Quinn said, nodding toward the house. "William Granger built it 3 years ago after the bank started turning a profit." Before Madeline could ask how he knew such details, the front door of the house flew open, and a portly man in his 50s hurried down the steps, followed by a younger man in a sheriff's badge. "Madeline." "My dear girl," William Granger called, his face flushed with relief. "We feared the worst when you weren't with the other passengers." He reached up to help her dismount, embracing her awkwardly once her feet touched the ground. "When the stage was found without you, I'm fine, Uncle," Madeline assured him, stepping back from his embrace. "Mr. Foster found me and took care of me until the storm passed." She turned to introduce Quinn, only to find him already engaged in a tense conversation with the sheriff. "Foster," the lawman was saying, his hand resting meaningfully on his holster. "Thought we'd seen the last of you in these parts." "Just returning Miss Granger to her family, Sheriff Davis," Quinn replied, his voice level but carrying an undercurrent of tension. "No need for concern." Sheriff Davis snorted. "That's for me to decide." He turned to Madeline. "Madam, did this man harm you in any way?" Madeline's eyes widened in shock. "Of course not. Mr. Foster saved my life. I would have frozen to death if not for him." William Granger stepped forward, placing a proprietary hand on Madeline's shoulder. "Well, we're grateful for that, certainly. But now that you're safely delivered, Mr. Foster, I'm sure you'll want to be on your way." Quinn's jaw tightened, but he merely nodded. He turned to Madeline, his expression softening slightly. "Take care, Miss Granger." He tipped his hat and turned his horse, preparing to leave. "Wait," Madeline called, shrugging off her uncle's hand. "You can't leave now. It's nearly dark and you've ridden all day." She turned to her uncle. "Surely we can offer Mr. Foster a meal and lodging for the night." William Granger and Sheriff Davis exchanged a look that Madeline couldn't interpret. Finally, her uncle cleared his throat. "I'm afraid that wouldn't be appropriate, my dear. Mr. Foster is known in these parts and not favorably. The hotel would be a more suitable arrangement." "I don't need charity," Quinn said stiffly. "I've got supplies and I've slept under the stars more nights than not." He fixed Madeline with a gaze that held both warmth and resignation. "Goodbye, Miss Granger. I wish you well in your new home." Before she could protest further, he wheeled his horse around and rode back the way they had come, the pack horse following obediently behind. Madeline watched until his figure disappeared into the gathering dusk, a strange emptiness settling in her chest. "Come inside, my dear," her uncle urged, guiding her toward the house. "Mrs. Peterson has prepared a special dinner to welcome you, and you must be exhausted from your ordeal." The interior of the Granger home was as impressive as its exterior, furnished with expensive carpets, heavy velvet draperies, and ornate furniture that spoke of wealth and status. A middle-aged woman in a severe black dress was introduced as Mrs. Peterson, the housekeeper, who showed Madeline to a well-appointed bedroom on the second floor. "Dinner will be served in 30 minutes, Miss Granger," Mrs. Peterson informed her. "There's hot water for washing, and I've laid out one of Mrs. Granger's old dresses that should fit you until your trunks arrive from the depot." Left alone, Madeline sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the sudden transition from Quinn's rustic cabin to this monument to prosperity. The bed was soft, the room warm, yet she found herself missing the simplicity and honesty of the past few days. At dinner, her uncle peppered her with questions about Chicago and her journey west, carefully avoiding any mention of her time with Quinn. When she finally asked directly about her rescuer, William's expression darkened. "Quincy Foster is not a topic for the dinner table, my dear," he said firmly. "Suffice it to say that he has a history in fluorescent that makes him unwelcome in polite society." "He saved my life," Madeline insisted. "What could he possibly have done to deserve such treatment?" William dabbed his mouth with his napkin, clearly uncomfortable. "I understand your gratitude, Madeline, but trust me when I say that Foster is not a man whose acquaintance you should cultivate. Now, let us speak of more pleasant matters. I've arranged for you to meet some of the town's leading families tomorrow evening at a small gathering here." Madeline recognized the change of subject for what it was, a dismissal of her concerns. She ate the remainder of her meal in silence, her thoughts repeatedly returning to Quinn and the mystery surrounding him. The next few weeks established a routine. Madeline's duties as her uncle's housekeeper were light misses. Peterson handled most of the actual work, leaving Madeline to act more as a hostess and companion to her bachelor uncle. She was introduced to fluorescent society, such as it was, and found herself the object of attention from several eligible men in town, particularly Dr. Theodore Palmer, a handsome young physician who had recently established a practice. Yet despite the comfort of her new life, Madeline found herself restless. She thought often of Quinn, wondering about his solitary existence in the mountains and the mysterious history that had made him a pariah in fluorescent. Her attempts to learn more were met with uncomfortable silence or vague allusions to past troubles. It was Mrs. Peterson who finally provided some clarity. Nearly a month after Madeline's arrival, as they worked together preparing for one of William's frequent dinner parties, the older woman unexpectedly broached the subject. "You still wonder about him, don't you?" she asked, not looking up from the silver she was polishing. "That Foster boy," Madeline's hand stilled in the act of arranging flowers. "You know him?" Mrs. Peterson gave a small nod. "Known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. His father, James Foster, was one of the founding members of this town back in '58. Good man, respected, had the largest cattle operation in the territory at one point." "What happened?" Madeline asked, abandoning all pretense of working. The housekeeper sighed, setting down the silver polishing cloth. "There was a woman, Elizabeth Blackwell, beautiful girl, daughter of the previous bank owner. She and young Quinn were sweet on each other from childhood. Everyone expected them to marry eventually." She paused, her expression distant with memory. "Then the war came. Quinn enlisted, went east to fight. Elizabeth waited, faithful at first, but as the months stretched into years, she grew lonely. Your uncle had just arrived in town then, ambitious and charming. He began calling on Elizabeth." A cold weight settled in Madeline's stomach. "My uncle and Quinn's sweetheart," Mrs. Peterson nodded grimly. "By the time Quinn returned in '65, Elizabeth and William were engaged. The boy was heartbroken, of course, but he accepted it. Went to work rebuilding his father's ranch, which had fallen into disrepair during the war." Her voice lowered. "Then came the bank foreclosures of '71. Bad drought, cattle dying. Half the ranchers in the valley couldn't make their payments. Your uncle, as the new bank owner, called in the loans." "Including Quinn's," Madeline guessed. "Yes, but there were irregularities, papers missing, terms changed. Quinn accused William of fraud, said he was manufacturing the foreclosures to seize land for the railroad that was coming through." Mrs. Peterson's eyes darted toward the door, checking that they were still alone. "There was a confrontation at the bank. Heated words, then shoving. Sheriff was called. In the end, Quinn lost everything, the ranch, his father's legacy, all of it." "And Elizabeth?" Madeline asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Died in childbirth a year after marrying your uncle. The baby, too. Mrs. Peterson's expression softened with sympathy. Quinn wasn't the only one who lost everything. The pieces fell into place: William's hostility, Quinn's isolation, the town's discomfort. Does everyone in town know this story? Those who were here then. Others just know there's bad blood. Mrs. Peterson resumed her polishing. Your uncle is a powerful man in Florissant now. Railroad made him rich, and people have short memories when it comes to how fortunes are made. She fixed Madeline with a direct look. He's not an evil man, Miss Granger, just ambitious, sometimes to a fault. The conversation left Madeline deeply troubled. She observed her uncle with new eyes in the days that followed, noting the respect he commanded in town, but also the underlying fear that accompanied it. William Granger was indeed a powerful man, and Florissant had prospered under his influence, but at what cost? Spring arrived early that year, melting the snowdrifts and transforming the landscape. As the weather improved, Madeline began taking regular rides on a mare her uncle had purchased for her, exploring the valley surrounding Florissant. She told herself she wasn't looking for Quinn's cabin, but each time she ventured further into the foothills, her eyes scanned the horizon for signs of smoke or settlement. It was on one such ride in early April that she encountered him again. She had followed a narrow trail along a creek swollen with snowmelt, farther than she had ventured before. Rounding a bend, she came upon Quinn waist-deep in the water, fishing with a handmade spear. He spotted her at the same moment she saw him. For a long second, they simply stared at each other across the distance. Then Quinn waded to shore, spear and fish in hand. "Miss Granger," he greeted her, his expression guarded. "You're a long way from town." Madeline dismounted, leading her horse closer. "I've taken to exploring," she explained, suddenly self-conscious under his steady gaze. "The valley is beautiful in spring." Quinn nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. He looked thinner than she remembered, the angles of his face more pronounced, but his eyes were still that startling blue that had captivated her from the beginning. "How are you finding life in Florissant?" he asked, setting his catch and spear aside. "Pleasant enough," she replied carefully, though not without its complexities. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Diplomatic answer." "I've learned about you and my uncle," Madeline said directly, seeing no point in prevarication. "About Elizabeth Blackwell and the foreclosure." Quinn's expression hardened. "Mrs. Peterson has been talking, I see. She thought I deserved to know the truth." "And what is the truth, Miss Granger?" Quinn asked, his voice deceptively calm. "That your uncle stole my land, my livelihood, and the woman I loved. Or that I'm a dangerous malcontent who couldn't accept legitimate business practices." Madeline stepped closer, undeterred by his bitterness. "I think the truth, as always, lies somewhere between. I think my uncle is not the man I thought he was. And I think you are exactly the man I believed you to be when you found me freezing beside that trail." The harshness in Quinn's face softened slightly. "You shouldn't be here, Madeline. Your uncle wouldn't approve. I'm 22 years old, Mr. Foster. I don't require my uncle's approval for my choice of riding companions." She offered a small smile. "Besides, I owe you my life. At the very least, I owe you a proper thank you." Quinn glanced down at the fish he'd caught. "I was planning to cook these for my dinner. There's more than enough for two if you're inclined to join me." The invitation surprised her, though perhaps it shouldn't have. "I'd like that," she said simply. Quinn's cabin was much as she remembered it, though the absence of snow and the spring light streaming through the windows made it seem less isolated, more welcoming. He moved with easy efficiency, preparing the fish while Madeline set the small table with plates and cutlery she found on the shelves. They ate outdoors, seated on a rough-hewn bench overlooking the valley below. The fish was delicious, seasoned with wild herbs Quinn had gathered, accompanied by bread he had baked himself. "You live well up here," Madeline observed, watching a hawk circle lazily in the clear blue sky above. "I get by," Quinn replied. "It's not the life I planned, but there's freedom in it." He glanced at her. "What about you? Is Florissant the life you planned?" Madeline considered the question. "I came west seeking security after losing my parents. Uncle William has provided that." She traced a pattern in the wood of the bench with her fingertip. "But no, this isn't the life I imagined for myself." "What did you imagine? A dress shop of my own, perhaps. A home that was truly mine, someone to share it with." She met his gaze. "Simple dreams, but mine." Quinn nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Simple dreams are often the most worth fighting for." They talked until the sun began to set, reluctant to end their unexpected reunion. Finally, Madeline rose with a sigh. "I should return before dark. Uncle William will be concerned." Quinn walked her to her horse, helping her mount with strong, gentle hands. "Will you come again?" he asked, a vulnerability in his voice that touched her deeply. "Yes," she promised without hesitation. "Next week, same day." His smile, then, was the first full, unguarded one she had seen from him, transforming his face and stealing her breath. "I'll be here." And so began a pattern that continued through the spring and into early summer. Once a week, Madeline would ride into the hills, ostensibly to sketch the wildflowers that carpeted the meadows, but in reality to spend precious hours with Quinn. They fished together, rode across high mountain pastures where Quinn's small herd of cattle grazed, and talked endlessly about books, ideas, and dreams. Quinn gradually shared more of his past, his childhood on the ranch, his experiences in the war, his plans for the future that had been derailed by the loss of his land. Madeline, in turn, confided her growing discomfort with her uncle's business practices and the expectations being placed upon her in Florissant society. "Dr. Palmer has made his intentions quite clear," she told Quinn one sunny afternoon as they sat beside a mountain stream, sharing a simple lunch. "Uncle William strongly encourages the match." Quinn's expression darkened, though he tried to hide it. "Palmer's well respected, would make a good husband." "Perhaps," Madeline agreed, watching him carefully, "if I loved him." Quinn met her gaze then, something raw and honest in his eyes. "And do you?" "No." She held his gaze steadily. "My heart lies elsewhere." The tension between them had been building for weeks in accidental touches, in lingering glances, in conversations that skimmed the edge of deeper feelings without quite acknowledging them. Now, with those simple words, Madeline had stripped away the pretense. Quinn moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek with infinite gentleness. "Madeline," he said, her name a prayer on his lips. "I have nothing to offer you, no land, no fortune, no standing in society." "I don't want those things," she whispered, leaning into his touch. "I want you, just you." Their first kiss was tentative, a gentle exploration that quickly deepened into something more urgent, more passionate. Quinn's arms encircled her, drawing her against the solid warmth of his chest, as years of loneliness and longing found expression in this connection between them. When they finally parted, both breathless, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since I found you half frozen beside that trail," he confessed. Madeline smiled, her heart too full for words. She kissed him again, a promise and an affirmation. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Madeline's life. Her secret meetings with Quinn became the center around which everything else revolved. They were careful she maintained her social obligations in Florissant, smiled politely at Dr. Palmer's attentions, and performed her duties as William's niece and housekeeper with apparent contentment. But her thoughts were always with Quinn, planning their next rendezvous, replaying their conversations and kisses in the privacy of her room at night. It couldn't last, of course. Paradise rarely does. The end came in late July, on an afternoon when thunderclouds gathered over the mountains, promising a summer storm. Madeline had arrived at Quinn's cabin earlier than usual, having made excuses to leave town during a lull in her duties. They had spent the morning together, talking and laughing, making plans for a future that seemed increasingly possible as Quinn's small cattle operation began to show signs of prosperity. "I've been thinking," Quinn said as they sat on the porch, watching the approaching storm. "I've nearly saved enough to buy that parcel of land to the south. With the additional grazing, I could double the herd within a year." Madeline leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "That's wonderful, Quinn." "It's not much," he admitted, "but it would be enough for a proper start. For us if—" He hesitated, then turned to face her fully. "Madeline, I know I'm not the match your family would choose for you. I know I can't give you the life you deserve, at least not yet, but I love you. I think I've loved you since that first day in the snow. If you could be patient, give me time to build something worthy of you." Madeline pressed her fingers to his lips, stopping his words. "Quinn Foster, are you asking me to marry you?" A smile broke across his face, boyish and hopeful. "I suppose I am. Badly, it seems." "Then ask properly," she challenged, her heart pounding with joy. Quinn took her hands in his expression growing serious. "Madeline Granger, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Will you build a life with me here in these mountains? It won't always be easy, but I swear to you, you will never lack for love or respect as long as I draw breath." Tears filled Madeline's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. When she found her voice, it was steady and sure. "Yes, Quinn. Yes, I will marry you." His kiss was jubilant, lifting her off her feet in his enthusiasm. When he set her down, they were both laughing, drunk on happiness and possibility. The sound of approaching horses shattered the moment. Quinn stiffened, his hand instinctively moving to the pistol at his hip. "Stay inside," he instructed, helping Madeline to her feet and guiding her toward the cabin door. "Quinn, please, Madeline, just until I see who it is." She reluctantly complied, watching through the window as 3 riders emerged from the tree line. Her heart sank as she recognized her uncle in the lead, flanked by Sheriff Davis and Dr. Palmer. The men dismounted, William Granger's face flushed with anger as he strode toward Quinn, who stood his ground on the porch steps. "Where is she, Foster?" William demanded, his normally controlled demeanor abandoned. "Where is my niece?" Before Quinn could answer, Madeline pushed open the cabin door. "I'm here, Uncle William, and I'm perfectly fine." William's gaze snapped to her, his expression a mix of relief and fury. "Get your things, Madeline. We're leaving immediately." "I'm not going anywhere," Madeline replied, moving to stand beside Quinn. "Not unless Quinn comes with me." William's face darkened. "This is absurd. You've been missing all day. Mrs. Peterson said you'd been riding in this direction for weeks." "I had to track you down like a common," he cut himself off, visibly struggling for control. "This man is taking advantage of you, Madeline. You don't know what he's capable of." "I know exactly who Quinn is," Madeline countered. "And I know what you did to him, Uncle. The fraudulent foreclosure, the land seizure, all of it." Sheriff Davis stepped forward, hand on his holster. "Now, Miss Granger, you're upset. Foster here has been filling your head with his version of events. It's the truth," Quinn interrupted, his voice level despite the tension evident in every line of his body. "And I have proof now." William's expression shifted from anger to wariness. "What are you talking about?" "Land records from the county seat," Quinn explained. "I rode there last month. The original mortgage documents don't match the ones you produced during the foreclosure. The terms were altered. Preposterous, William blustered, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You're trying to extort me, using my niece as leverage. Uncle William, stop, Madeline pleaded. This isn't about the past, it's about now, about the future. She took Quinn's hand in hers, drawing strength from his steady presence. Quinn has asked me to marry him, and I've accepted. The silence that followed her announcement was absolute, broken only by a distant rumble of thunder. Dr. Palmer looked stricken, Sheriff Davis uncomfortable, and William looked as though he'd been struck a physical blow. You can't be serious, he finally managed. This man is beneath you, Madeline, a failed rancher with a grudge and a violent temper. He's the man I love, Madeline said simply, and I'm going to marry him with or without your blessing. William's face hardened. Then it will be without. If you choose him, you are no longer my niece. You'll receive no portion of my estate, no support, nothing. Madeline felt Quinn tense beside her but squeezed his hand reassuringly. I understand, Uncle. I'm sorry it's come to this. For a moment, something like regret flickered across William's features. Then his expression closed, becoming the impassive mask of the successful businessman. Theodore, he said, turning to Dr. Palmer, would you escort my niece back to town to collect her belongings? Dr. Palmer stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Madeline, please. Don't throw away your future on this. He gestured dismissively at Quinn and the modest cabin. This is my future, Madeline replied firmly. I'm sorry, Theodore. You're a good man, but my heart belongs to Quinn. The storm that had been threatening all afternoon finally broke, fat raindrops beginning to fall as the confrontation reached its climax. William Granger surveyed the couple before him with cold eyes. You have until tomorrow noon to collect your things from my house, he informed Madeline. After that, they'll be donated to the church charity. He turned to remount his horse, then paused. And Foster, if I find you've mistreated her in any way, there won't be a place in this territory remote enough for you to hide. Quinn met the older man's gaze without flinching. I'll spend my life making her happy, Granger. That's a promise. William snorted in disbelief, but offered no further comment. The three men mounted and rode away as the rain intensified, leaving Quinn and Madeline standing together on the porch. Are you sure, Madeline? Quinn asked once the riders were out of sight. You'd be giving up so much comfort, security, your family. Madeline turned to face him, rain dripping from her hair and lashes. I'm choosing love, Quinn. I'm choosing you. That's all that matters. Their kiss, passionate and affirming, was accompanied by the crescendo of the storm, nature itself seeming to acknowledge the power and significance of their choice. The following day, Quinn accompanied Madeline to her uncle's house to collect her belongings. William was conspicuously absent, having left word that he was conducting business in Helena and would not return for several days. Mrs. Peterson helped Madeline pack her clothes and personal items, tears in the older woman's eyes as she worked. I always hoped you'd find happiness, child, she told Madeline as they folded dresses into a trunk. I just didn't expect it would be with Quinn Foster. Madeline smiled gently. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it, Mrs. Peterson nodded, then pressed a small leather pouch into Madeline's hand. Your uncle set aside money for your dowry when you first arrived. He planned to present it when you married Dr. Palmer. She glanced toward the door, ensuring they weren't overheard. It's rightfully yours, no matter who you marry. Take it. Start your life together with some security. Madeline hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. I don't know if Quinn would accept it. Then don't tell him where it came from, Mrs. Peterson advised pragmatically. Just say it's your savings from your work in Chicago. In the end, Madeline accepted the money. Quinn had worked so hard to rebuild his life. This could help them establish their future more quickly. They were married a week later in a simple ceremony performed by the pastor in Glacier Creek, a small settlement 30 miles from Florissant, where Quinn occasionally traded furs and meat. Their wedding night was spent in Quinn's cabin, now their cabin, the space transformed by Madeline's feminine touches. Curtains at the windows, a colorful quilt on the bed, wildflowers in a jar on the table. Quinn had been tender and patient as they explored this new dimension of their relationship, his reverence for her body matched only by his passion. As summer gave way to autumn, they settled into a rhythm of shared work and shared dreams. Quinn taught Madeline the practical skills needed for mountain living: how to track game, preserve meat, predict weather changes. She, in turn, began a small garden behind the cabin and used her sewing skills to create clothing they could sell in town for additional income. The money Mrs. Peterson had given her remained largely untouched, saved for emergencies or opportunities that might arise. When Quinn questioned its existence, Madeline explained it as she had planned, and he accepted her explanation without suspicion, too grateful for her presence in his life to question such good fortune. Word reached them in late September that William Granger had suffered a heart seizure. Though he survived, his health was significantly compromised, forcing him to reduce his involvement in the bank's operations. Madeline wrote to him, a letter of reconciliation and concern, but received no reply. "Give him time," Quinn advised, holding her as she wept over her uncle's continued rejection. Pride is a powerful thing, especially for men like William Granger, but blood ties run deeper. October brought the first snow, earlier than usual, a reminder of how they had met less than a year before. They celebrated with a special dinner, reminiscing about that fateful day when Quinn had found her shivering beside the trail. "I knew you were trouble the moment I saw you," Quinn teased, refilling their coffee cups. "A beautiful woman half frozen in the wilderness." "Had disaster written all over it." Madeline laughed, her eyes bright with happiness. "And yet you said no one freezes while I'm breathing. Very heroic, Mr. Foster." "What can I say? I'm a man of my word." His expression grew serious. "And I meant it, Madeline. I'll always protect you, always keep you warm and safe, whatever it takes." She reached across the table to take his hand. "I know, Quinn, and I'll always do the same for you." As winter settled in earnest across the Montana territory, their love deepened with each passing day. They faced the challenges of the harsh season together, a wolf pack threatening the cattle, a week-long blizzard that tested the limits of their supplies, Quinn's brief but frightening bout with fever after falling through ice while fishing through it all. Madeline never once regretted her choice. The life they were building was harder in many ways than what she might have had in Florissant, but it was honest, meaningful, and filled with a love that sustained her through even the darkest, coldest nights. Spring arrived once more, bringing with it unexpected news from town. Dr. Palmer, passing through their valley on his way to attend a birth at a distant ranch, stopped at their cabin with information that would change everything. "William's not well," he told them, accepting the coffee Madeline offered. "The heart condition is worse than we initially thought." "He's been asking for you, Madeline." She exchanged a look with Quinn, who nodded encouragingly. "Of course I'll go to him," she said. "When?" "As soon as possible," Dr. Palmer advised. "I don't want to alarm you unnecessarily, but—" He trailed off, his professional demeanor unable to fully mask his concern. They rode to Florissant the next morning, arriving by midday. The town had changed little in the months since Madeline had left, though there were a few new buildings along the main street and a general air of prosperity that spoke to continued growth. William Granger's house, however, had the unmistakable atmosphere of illness about it. The curtains were drawn against the spring sunshine, and Mrs. Peterson, who answered their knock, looked tired and strained. "He's in his room," she told Madeline, casting a wary glance at Quinn. "He's been asking for you these past 3 days." "I'll wait downstairs," Quinn offered, sensing the delicacy of the situation. Madeline squeezed his hand gratefully before following Mrs. Peterson up the stairs to her uncle's bedroom. The room was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of medicinal preparations. William Granger lay propped up on pillows, his once robust frame shockingly diminished, his face pale and drawn. "Uncle William," Madeline called softly, approaching the bed, his eyes opened slowly, focusing on her with effort. "Madeline, you came." His voice was weak but clear. "Of course I came." She sat beside him, taking his frail hand in hers. "How are you feeling?" A ghost of his old sardonic smile touched his lips, like a man with one foot in the grave. He studied her face intently. "You look well, happy." "I am," she confirmed. "Quinn is a good husband." William nodded, closing his eyes briefly as though gathering strength. "Is he here?" "Downstairs. He thought it best to give us privacy." "Bring him up," William requested, surprising her. "What I have to say concerns both of you." Madeline hesitated, then nodded and went to fetch Quinn. When they returned together, William gestured for them both to sit near the bed. "I don't have much time," he began without preamble. "The doctors give me weeks, perhaps a month at most." He held up a hand to forestall Madeline's protests. "It's the truth, and I've made my peace with it." He drew a labored breath. "What I cannot make peace with is leaving this world with unfinished business." Quinn shifted uncomfortably but remained silent, allowing the older man to continue at his own pace. "I did you a great wrong, Foster," William said, addressing Quinn directly. "The foreclosure was fraudulent, as you discovered. I altered the terms, created impossible conditions, all to seize your land for the railroad." He coughed, a painful, rattling sound. "I told myself it was just business, progress that couldn't be stopped. But the truth is, I wanted to destroy you because Elizabeth loved you first." The admission hung in the air, startling in its honesty. Quinn's expression remained carefully neutral, though Madeline could feel the tension in him. "Why are you telling us this now?" Quinn finally asked. William's gaze shifted to Madeline. "Because I've lost too much to pride already. My wife, my relationship with my niece." He paused, gathering strength. "I've made arrangements with my lawyers. The deed to the Foster ranch, the original boundaries, before the parceling will be transferred back to you free and clear. Consider it Madeline's inheritance, long overdue." Madeline gasped, her hand finding Quinn's. "Uncle William, it's the right thing to do," William interrupted. "Too late, perhaps, but still right." He focused on Quinn again. "I don't expect your forgiveness, Foster. I don't deserve it. But I ask that you take care of my niece, make her happy, give her the family I failed to provide." Quinn studied the dying man for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. "I can't say I forgive everything that happened, Granger, but I understand being blinded by love for her." His gaze shifted briefly to Madeline. "And I promise you she'll want for nothing I can give her, including family." William clasped Quinn's hand with surprising strength, relief evident in his face. "Thank you." He released Quinn's hand and turned to Madeline. "Can you forgive an old fool, my dear?" Tears streamed down Madeline's face as she leaned forward to embrace her uncle. "There's nothing to forgive," she whispered. "Nothing at all." William Granger died peacefully 3 weeks later with Madeline at his bedside. Quinn, true to his word, stood by her through the funeral and the complex legal arrangements that followed. As promised, The Foster Ranch, 5,000 acres of prime grazing land with water rights to the creek, was restored to Quinn's ownership, along with a substantial sum that William had set aside specifically for Madeline. He tried to make amends, Madeline reflected as they rode together across the newly recovered land, surveying what was now theirs. In his own way, Quinn nodded, his eyes scanning the familiar landscape with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. "It doesn't erase the past," he acknowledged, "but it creates a future I never thought possible." They reined in their horses at the crest of a hill overlooking the valley. Below them stretched meadows vibrant with spring wildflowers, forests rich with game, and streams teeming with fish. In the distance, they could just make out the foundations of the original Foster homestead, abandoned after the foreclosure but now ready to be rebuilt. "What do you think?" Quinn asked, his arm encircling Madeline's waist as they gazed at the panorama before them. "Shall we build our home here? Start our family on the same land where I grew up?" Madeline leaned into his embrace, her heart full to bursting with love and possibility. "Yes," she answered simply. "Let's come home, Quinn." The next year passed in a whirlwind of activity. They built a new house on the foundations of the old Foster homestead, larger and more comfortable than the cabin, but still modest by Florissant standards. Quinn expanded his cattle operation, hiring several hands to help manage the growing herd. Madeline, putting her sewing skills to practical use, opened a small dress shop in town, bridging the gap between her old life and new. Florissant gradually accepted their return to prominence, memory of the old scandal fading in the face of their obvious prosperity and happiness. Dr. Palmer, having overcome his initial disappointment, became a friend and regular visitor. Sheriff Davis, recognizing which way the wind was blowing, made overtures of reconciliation that Quinn accepted with reserved grace. By the following winter, almost 2 years to the day since Quinn had found Madeline shivering beside the trail, they were expecting their first child. As snow blanketed the land once more, they sat before the fire in their new home, Madeline's head resting on Quinn's shoulder, his hand gently cradling her swollen belly. "Boy or girl?" Quinn wondered aloud, feeling the baby kick against his palm. Madeline smiled, covering his hand with her own. "Does it matter?" "Not in the slightest," he assured her, "though I'm partial to a daughter with her mother's spirit and beauty." "And I rather fancy a son with his father's strength and honor," she countered. Quinn kissed her temple, gratitude overwhelming him as it often did when he considered how close he had come to missing this life, this love. "Either way, this child will never know cold or hunger or loneliness," he promised. "Not while I'm breathing." Madeline turned in his arms, framing his face with her hands. "No one freezes while you're breathing," she echoed his words from that fateful day. "My hero then, my hero now, my hero always." Their kiss, tender and passionate, sealed the promise of their shared future, a future built on love that had withstood hardship, separation, and reconciliation, emerging stronger for the trials it had endured. Outside, the Montana winter raged, but within the walls of their home, Quinn and Madeline Foster had all the warmth they would ever need. When spring arrived once more, it brought with it the birth of their son James William Foster, named for both his grandfather and the man whose final act of conscience had restored the family legacy. The boy was strong and healthy, with Quinn's blue eyes and Madeline's determined chin, a perfect blend of them both. As the years passed, the Foster Ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. 2 more children joined the family, twin girls, Elizabeth and Rose, who inherited their mother's beauty and their father's adventurous spirit. The dress shop in town expanded into a thriving business, managed primarily by Madeline's capable assistant, while she divided her time between town and ranch. Florissant grew and changed with the times, but some things remained constant: the harsh beauty of the Montana landscape, the strong bonds of family and community, and the enduring love story of the couple whose chance meeting in a snowstorm had changed both their lives forever. On cold winter nights, when the wind howled around the eaves of their home, Quinn would gather his family close around the hearth and tell the story of how he had found their mother shivering beside the trail so many years ago. "And what did you say, Papa?" little Elizabeth would inevitably ask, though she knew the answer by heart. Quinn would smile, his eyes meeting Madeline's across the circle of their children. "I said, no one freezes while I'm breathing." And Madeline, her heart as full of love for this man as it had been on that first day, would smile back, knowing that some promises once made lasted a lifetime.